Okay, thank you, Mr. Clerk, members of the committee. Good afternoon and welcome to our virtual meeting of Brampton's Committee of Council. We will begin the meeting with the City Clerk calling the roll for the attendance at today's meeting. Mr. Clerk.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. I will call the members' names. Councillor Santos.
Here.
Councillor Chair Vicente is here. Councillor Willens. Councillor Willens. I will come back to you.
Oh, sorry, Peter here.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Paleshi.
I'm here, Peter.
Councillor Bowman.
Present.
And Councillor Medeiros, I think you're just joining the meeting right now. Can you just confirm your presence, please?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Fortini.
I'm here, Peter.
Councillor Singh, I don't think has joined us yet. I do see him coming in now. So I will go to Councillor Dillon.
I'm here, thank you.
Councillor Singh, can you please confirm?
Yep, I'm here. Thank you, Peter, for turning my mic.
Thank you. And Mayor Brown?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, all members are present.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Members of the committee, our next item is approval of the agenda. Does any member wish to add a business item to today's meeting? If so, please use the chat function. Recognizing Councillor Williams.
Hi, yes, I have an item to add for in camera, and I'm requesting the acting solicitor and the clerk only, as well as council, to be present.
So through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor, what is the purpose, or what is the reason, the Municipal Act reason for the closed session?
I've spoken with the city solicitor, Diana Suze, and I was informed that she would let you know that she's approved this item to be added.
Please just bear with me a moment. So through you, Mr. Chair, so Councillor Williams has been in contact with the acting city solicitor, and the understanding is that the matter would qualify under closed session meeting exception under section 239(2)B for personnel matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, do you have any other items?
No, that is it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dillon. Councillor Dillon?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to add a discussion item on cottonwood trees, particularly in the Linstock Drive area. I've forwarded to the clerk and CC Council some correspondence as well as some videos and pictures for your information.
So, Mr. Chair, my advice would be that would be under community services section as new business item 11.3.1.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I see no other speakers wishing to add an item. I have a motion.
No, Councillor Vicente, I have a question.
Sorry.
So the item that was added into closed session, I'm not sure. Councillor Williams had specifically identified specific staff to be there, and I'm not sure why the CAO is not included in that. So I don't. This is a surprise item to me. So I don't think it would be appropriate for us to go into close just with the clerk and with legal there if we don't actually know why we're not bringing on board, why the CAO wouldn't be there.
Thank you, Councillor Santos. Referring to what the clerk said earlier, perhaps we could have the city solicitor just to provide an explanation.
Through the chair, that is the request of the councillor to limit the individuals in closed session. The I reviewed the matter with the councillor in terms of whether it qualifies under the exemption set out in the Municipal Act. And based on the information I was provided, it does qualify as such. Perhaps the issue of who should be in closed session can be a matter that is dealt with and discussed at the commencement of that closed session.
Okay, I'm totally fine with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So we have a motion moved by Councillor Santos to approve the agenda. Instead of seating a recorded vote for the item, I'll ask if there is anyone opposed to the motion. Otherwise, your vote will count in the affirmative. Are there any objections?
Sorry,
Seeing
through you,
none.
Mr. Chair. This is the clerk, sorry. Councillor Medeiros has put his name down to speak. Just Councillor Medeiros, you're chatting with myself instead of all the participants. But Councillor Medeiros would like to speak.
So for all members of the committee, make sure that when you're in the chat, you're speaking to all panelists. Councillor Medeiros, you're recognized on the floor.
Thank you, Councillor Vicente. It's been explained. Councillor Santos actually asked the exact same thing. I didn't know or understand who has been excluded and for why. But I think in camera, then I guess our legal, we can address that then in camera, because my understanding is the councillor can't just decide who's in there or not, that there would have to be a vote on it.
So, and through you, Mr. Chair, just to clarify, the council's procedure bylaw is very clear. If there is a matter in closed session that deals with a personnel matter about an identifiable individual, the CAO makes the decision about who is in the room.
Okay.
So, but at this point, I would treat that only as a request. The decision of the committee is to add the item as a closed session, and the matter can be discussed further in closed session.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any objections to the motion? Seeing none, that carries. Members of committee, for everyone's awareness, in-person attendance at this meeting continues to be restricted. Members and most staff are participating electronically in this meeting, but the public can still access and participate in the meeting by a few different ways. First, by watching remotely this meeting through the city's live stream and watching the archived video afterwards. Prior to the start of the meeting, pre-registering with the city clerk's office to speak as a delegation before the committee during this virtual meeting to share your comments and to provide your input on specific agenda items. Prior to the start of the meeting, you can send written audio or video submissions to the city clerk's office to be provided to the committee for consideration during this virtual meeting as your input on a specific agenda item. And during the meeting, you can submit questions about the agenda business and recommendations made by committee today by emailing the city clerk's office at cityclerksoffice@brampton.ca with your question, which may be read into the public record during the public question period sections of today's agenda. Also, please continue to follow important service and public health updates through the city's website at www.brampton.ca, which includes updated information on the city's response, as well as links to other important sources of information, including Region of Peel Public Health, Province of Ontario, and Government of Canada. Members of the committee, we now move on to item 3, declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Do any members have a declaration of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act for any matter to be considered on today's agenda? Seeing none, the clerk will so note for the meeting minutes. Next, we move on to consent. The consent motion items listed with a caret on the agenda are considered to be routine and non-controversial. The consent motion is to adopt these matters on today's agenda without the need for separate discussion on the items, unless a member requests a separate discussion. Does any member wish to add or remove an item from the consent motion today? Seeing none, we have a motion moved by Councillor Willens to approve the consent motion. Any opposed? Seeing none, that carries. Next, we move on to item 5, announcements. We have item 5.1, an announcement regarding the 2019 and 2020 United Way fundraising campaign. Joining us today is Cindy Tate, the chair for the 2019 United Way fundraising campaign. Also, we have Matthew Slack, the chair for the 2020 United Way fundraising campaign. We have Anita Stalinga, United Way Greater Toronto Chief of Staff and former President CEO of the United Way for Peel Region, who is standing in place of Danielle Zanotti, the President and CEO for the United Way of Greater Toronto. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Welcome. Before we start the presentation, I just wanted to ask permission for us just to go a little over in announcements a lot of time. We didn't have a chance to present beginning of the year due to the shutdown, and I'd like to be able to give our United Way partner to a few minutes just to touch on what United Way is doing in Brampton through COVID and the current situation we're in.
Can we have someone move for
Yep, I'll move it, sure. Yep,
So
Councillor
moved.
Williams. Yep.
Please proceed.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And thank you as well, Mayor Brown, members of council and senior staff. If we can get the next slide, please. I want to say a very sincere thank you to members of council, staff, and senior staff and the rest of the staff who are watching today for their help with last year's 2019 campaign. Honestly, last year our organization went through a few internal changes, and yet no matter what came to us, everyone was positive and enthusiastic and demonstrated support of our 2019 campaign. Each of our employees stepped up and helped show Brampton's core values of being able to give back to our residents and our community. I'm extremely grateful for everyone who donated, not only just through the campaign financially, but also their time and resources. And I wanted to just show on this screen some of the successes we had from last year, as well as our curling fun spiel, our public works week, doing the agency bus tour, and the number of staff-run events. City of Brampton also had a chance to take part in 2 external events that were new to us, the UPS plane pull and the CN Tower climb. I want to also just recognize the staff departments that really stepped up and really helped drive the campaign. And that was, of course, members of council. You definitely helped. Our transit department, our enforcement, public works, IT departments, and our clerk's office for the extraordinary events that they all ran, which contributed towards our overall campaign. Next slide, please. With your help, and this is where, if we were in person, I would be standing with a huge oversized check. So keep that in mind. We would be presenting this to United Way and we'd be able to gather for a photo. City of Brampton Employee Fundraising Campaign was able to raise $106,606.06. We did that through a combined total of people pledging sometimes off of payroll deductions or one-time payments, our city-run events, as well as our United Way events. At this point, just a sincere thank you to everyone, and I want to introduce our 2020 United Way campaign chair, Matthew Slack, who is also speaking on behalf of our 2020 vice chair, Raj Karan China.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Cindy. Congratulations on your 2019 campaign. It was a true success. Again, my name is Matthew Slack, the 2020 campaign chair, and I'd also like to introduce Raj Karan China, our 2020 campaign vice chair. The 2020 United Way fundraising goal this year is $106,000. To start the 2020 campaign, 2 pre-COVID-19 events were successfully completed. We raised a little over $15,000. Due to the COVID-19 outbreak, the City of Brampton's United Way 2020 campaign was unfortunately placed on hold. A series of spring events were canceled out, resulting in a loss of over $1,000 in potential revenues based on the 2019 campaign. Some of those events include the National Public Works Week, Bus Pull and Food Festival, and our Great Wolf Lodge weekends that we typically run in June. Looking forward, the United Way campaign strategy for 2020 is to restart the campaign in July of 2020 and raise awareness between the months of July and October of 2020. As a result, we're going to be canceling all remaining events that make social distancing a challenge. With this comes a loss of approximately $18,000 based on 2019 numbers. We look to hold events that can support social distancing and also encourage participation. Our aim is to focus heavily on employee pledges, for example, the automatic payroll deduction. Next slide, please. Oh, my apologies. Next slide, please. The 2020 campaign goal is to maintain or exceed the amount raised in 2020 as shown below. So in 2019, the breakdown is as follows. Cindy alluded to this. In the spring, they raised roughly $12,000, where in this year at spring, we were raising $16,000, up roughly 23%. This is pre-COVID-19. Our goal for the fall events are to raise roughly $30,000, and our goal events for pledges will be around the $61,000 to total the 106 that our aim is this year. Overall, employee reaction and willingness to participate is unknown due to the COVID-19 pandemic. However, we believe that the United Way cause justifies our actions. Thank you. I'd like to introduce Anita to say a few words. Next slide, please.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Thank you, Cindy and Matthew, for that. I would too also like to start by extending a sincere appreciation to all of you. Thank you, Mayor Brown, councillors, and the senior leadership team for the opportunity today and your steadfast support for United Way. Thank you, Councillor Willens, as the council lead for our campaign last year, and the executive team for sponsoring our campaign kickoff in September. Your support is so vital. I would also like to say special thanks to Mayor Brown, Councillor Martin Medeiros, Councillor Charmaine Williams, Councillor Doug Willens, and Councillor Pat Fortini for their leadership in our longest night event in February this year. Councillor Martin Medeiros raised the most funds. Thank you so much. And to all for the efforts of your team to raise awareness about homelessness and people living in poverty. A campaign this successful requires a strong and dedicated team, and I would like to thank Cindy Tate and the volunteer committee for raising over $106,000. That is phenomenal. And plans, as you heard, are already underway for the next campaign, and I would like to thank and welcome Matthew Slack as campaign chair and Raj Karanchana as co-chair for 2020 to bring their leadership and commitment to this work. And I would like to thank all the staff that participate and contribute to our campaign, and in particular, the unions for participating in the campaign. ATU Local 1573, Fire BFFA Local 1068, QP Local 831, Library QP Local 1776. I don't think we can say thank you enough, because you are ensuring that people who need support across Brampton can access services when and where they need them. Often our network is invisible until you need it, and then it becomes an important part of our community infrastructure. Our commitment to you has been and always will be to have a strong network of agencies that support Brampton residents. We are investing $2.9 million to support residents that are right here and are most vulnerable and at risk. We do this through 75 programs that are delivered by 40 local agencies, not to mention research and public policy work to shine the light on key issues. I'd like to share a few examples with you of our investment right here. Through this network of agencies, we supported 66,000 residents of Brampton. Agencies like African Community Services, Rapport Youth and Family Services, The Journey, Knight's Table, Boys and Girls Club, Big Brothers Big Sisters, Punjabi Community Health Services, just to mention a few. And then when COVID-19 impacted our community, we responded immediately by providing funds to local supports. The federal government turned to us to administer 2 emergency funding programs, one to support vulnerable seniors, and the other for seniors, youth, and mental health supports. This second funding stream is currently underway, and we are still accepting applications for support. And we launched our own local love fund. Electra, a strong corporate partner of ours, donated to invest locally, as an example. And with these funds, we were able to provide immediate supports to 13 local projects, investing over $120,000. And the projects ranged from support for Black youth fleeing domestic violence to providing gloves, masks, sanitizers, grocery cards, culturally relevant food, including halal food, and laptops to low-income seniors and their families, to providing grocery cards to homeless and underhoused individuals. Through this rapid response, we anticipate supporting about 5,000 residents during this time. We have shared information about these projects with our Brampton councillors to keep you informed about our work. And as we look out to recovery from COVID-19, we know that people who are already marginalized and vulnerable will face an even tougher and longer road ahead. We have seen a rise in calls as reported by 211, people looking for supports for mental health, domestic violence, food and housing security. A survey by the Ontario Not-for-Profit Network found that demand for services has risen by 40% already. We are working hard to launch our campaign now as we want to protect this network of services, often invisible, but because of COVID now, more visible than ever, connected and nimble to adjust and support people in ways that they need. And for that work ahead, to dig deep and protect that resilience for our residents and for the recovery and support we are already providing because of you, I thank you for your support on behalf of our community. Thank you so much for everything you do and for the opportunity to support United Way and to be here today to express our appreciation. Thanks again.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you so much for all of the work that you and everyone at the United Way does. And thank you to Cindy Tate for everything you do to gather the troops here at City Hall. I see no speakers or questions for today, so I just want to thank you for presenting to us today. And we will now move on to our next item on the agenda, which is item 6.1, Government Relations Update. And we have a staff report, item 6.1, Government Relation Matters. And Gurdeep Kaur is here with a presentation for committee on Government Relation Matters. Gurdeep.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Mayor Brown and members of council. Slide 2, please.
Welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Vicente. We will start with 3 federal programs that were announced in relation to COVID-19 by the federal government over the past week. The Canada Emergency Response Benefit has been extended for an additional 8 weeks through to October the 3rd, 2020. As of this Friday, applications will begin to be accepted for the Canada Emergency Business Account to small businesses who were previously deemed ineligible. Lastly, the application process for the previously announced Surplus Food Rescue Program opened on Monday. We're currently exploring how this program can benefit our community. Slide 3 and following, slide 4, please. I'm going to be giving a provincial update now. In addition to allowing more regions to move into phase 2 of their reopening framework, the province continues to ease various measures, including this week on wedding and funeral ceremonies across the province, proposing changes to how data is reported on race, income, language, household size for individuals who have tested positive for COVID-19. Lastly, in provincial news, there was an announced $46 million to increase community-based and Aboriginal Pacific supports for child and youth victims of sex trafficking as part of the province's $307 million and 5-year anti-human trafficking strategy. This is a very vital and important issue in Peel. Slide 5 and then slide 6, please. This is going to be a region appeal update. This is a committee week at the region. Last week at the Region Council, there was a discussion on mental health and addictions needs in Peel, which will come back to Regional Council next week, as well as a discussion and declaration to attend systemic discrimination in the region of Peel. Next slide, please. Lastly, preparations are well underway and planning for the AMO conference, which is upcoming in August. I will be sending all members of council further details, including proposed delegation meetings and issues this week. That is all we have for government relations updates. I thank you, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions at this time if you have.
Thank you very much, Gurdeep. I see no questions do have a question from Councillor Williams. Councillor Williams.
Hi, it's just a quick question about AMO. And just to clarify, will the AMO will be held virtually, or are they just kind of saying things are tentative until they hear where we're at as we approach August?
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Williams. It will be actually a virtual seminar that's going to take place in August. And once we follow up with the email that we'll be sending out to all the offices, it will have all the details as to how AMO will be conducted and the meeting notes, and also just a report of items from our end that all the councillors will need to be aware of as well.
Okay, great. And when last year at AMO, we had these excellent information booklets that were given to all of the MPs that we spoke to, MPPs, sorry. Will they be receiving a hard copy, and are those documents finished for us to have a look at, whether it's PDF? Where are we at with those documents?
We're actually in the process of preparing those documents as we speak, and our aim is to finalize them, and we will be sending them out to you, and we could possibly even do a hard copy and also a PDF, just so ease of reference for you, that when you are in these delegation meetings, you are able to go through all the concerns and issues. So you will get all your required materials, and we will also do virtual meetings with everyone just to prepare you in advance as well. So if there's any issues or concerns or items that you think that we need to discuss or add, we'll be more than happy to include those as well.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, I have a motion moved by Councillor Singh to receive this report. Are there any objections? That carries. Thank you, members of the committee. We'll now move on to item 6.2, which is an update from Mayor Brown regarding the COVID-19 emergency. Mayor Brown.
Thank you, Councillor Vicente. I'll just give a brief update from the last week. We had our weekly update this morning with GTA Press, and I would note that Councillor Bowman helped out this morning. Thank you for that, Councillor Bowman. We updated that we've been given the go-ahead from Peel Public Health to reopen the Brampton farmers market. We talked about the provincial changes of 5 people to 10 people. I can share with you, I've had a few conversations with the Premier in the last week. We've spoken, I think, now on 3 occasions in the last week. I appreciate the fact that we got the pop-up center at Gore Meadows that we asked for. We've got the support for the South Fletcher's drive-through, which is now fully operational. We've now done more testing than anywhere else in the province. So a big congratulations to Osler. They tested over 51,000 people right now. So we have more testing in our community than anywhere else in the province. And so we always said testing is important. And so I'm very proud of the fact that we've made huge strides in testing. It helps us isolate the virus. It helps us determine where it is. And so, we are actually, we're seeing the numbers go down, but we also have a transparent look at the community in terms of where it's popped up and where we need to do work. If you look at the numbers today, Mississauga and Brampton were pretty similar. I think it was like 15 and 20, but, we've come a long way from a few weeks ago when our numbers were going up by almost 100 some days. And so I'm encouraged by the progress we are making. We're, as Dr. Lowe says, we're on the tail end of the first phase. And it's been hard. I know it's been hard on everyone, but I think the city of Brampton has done a great job helping residents through this difficult period. And I want to thank all the members of council who have stepped up in such a big way. There's the report on the council agenda today about the Arts Fund. I think this is a wonderful initiative and recommendation to how we can reallocate some of the funds to artists and those in the cultural industry that are struggling. The last thing I wanted to mention is that at some point we're going to have to make a decision on day camps in the summer. And I know a number of cities have accommodated new rules and regulations around day camps. And I want you to know that Derek Boyce and his team are already doing that work as we speak. And so as soon as we have the go-ahead from the province, Martin Medeiros and his task force will have recommendations ready to go. But it's certainly been an encouraging week, whether it's the permission from public health, whether it is the testing results, or the numbers going down. It's been an encouraging 7 days.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. Do any members have any questions or comments? If so, please use the chat function to indicate that you'd like to speak. I recognize Councillor Santos.
Thank you, through you, Chair, and thank you, Mayor Brown, for your update. Yesterday, I actually went asymptomatic, so no symptoms, went to go get tested at the South Fletcher's mobile pop-up site. And there were a lot of cars there. There are a lot of people getting tested. And I encourage everybody, as much as you can, to also get tested, because the more people that get tested, the easier it is for us to actually trace where COVID exists in Brampton. And the faster we can flatten the curve. I'm still waiting for my test results to come back. But in the meantime, I'm encouraging everyone to go please get tested. Thank you.
And thank you, Councillor Santos. And I would highlight that, testing is easy. They do a very professional job at Osler, top notch. I went and got tested a few weeks ago when we were encouraging everyone to get tested, to be a good example myself. And I have to say, it's uncomfortable for 2 seconds while they test you. And then by the time you realize it's uncomfortable, it's over. And so please go and get yourself tested. It is easy, and it helps us determine where the virus is. And so, you look at the example in New Zealand yesterday, where they thought they were COVID free. They didn't test 2 individuals coming in. It turned out, despite the fact they didn't have symptoms, they tested positive. And so you never know. That's why testing is so important. And it caused a departure in that country from the regulations they had, and they had to revisit everything. And so even if you feel healthy and aren't symptomatic, please get yourself tested. We've got the apparatus to do so in Brampton. And thank you, Councillor Santos, for taking that initiative and being a good example.
And just a quick follow-up to what you said, Mayor Brown, the other reason why I got tested, even though I am asymptomatic, is because of this social bubble thing, where we are now allowed to be around up to 10 people within a particular social bubble. And to your point, if COVID can exist without symptoms, you don't necessarily know if you're protecting those people within your social bubble if you don't have symptoms yourself. So before I start going into a social bubble of 10 people, I wanted to go get tested just to make sure. And one final thing I should say is to say thank you to William Osler, to BMO, to all of the security staff who were there yesterday, to Brampton Fire Emergency Services, everyone who put it together at South Fletcher's and are now also putting their lives at risk themselves by administering these tests.
Thank you, Councillor Santos. Permission for the chair to be heard?
Of course.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, I've had some inquiry from a resident with regards to the Presto fares on Brampton Transit. Because of the changes and revisions to the Brampton Transit schedule, it can sometimes take more than the 2-hour allocation for a transit rider to get from where they are leaving to their destination. And what can sometimes happen is that if the trip exceeds 2 hours and they are traveling, say, from Brampton to Mississauga or from Brampton to Oakville, what can happen is they may incur an additional fare when they present their Presto Pass at a transfer point. And so through you, Mayor, to transit staff. Is this something that is happening, and what can the city do to help our transit riders in this regard?
Certainly, through you, Chair, and to you, Presto offers a 2-hour time frame for a period pass, or sorry, for a pass that allows anyone to travel within a 905. This is an agreement that we have with all 905 systems. For the last several months, I know all the fare systems have been free. However, if an individual is traveling through multi-jurisdictions, there is still a 2-hour limit, and it becomes a technical challenge as well with Presto and having agreements with all the other jurisdictions on that. There may be times, Chair, that a trip may take longer than 2 hours given the capacity issues that we're receiving, and certainly drivers do have discretion on that. But clearly, the 2-hour limit is a Presto and a 905 system agreement that was made some time ago. I hope that clarifies it a bit.
Okay, and that's important. So for members of committee to understand, do we as a city have an ability to implement a tool called fare capping, which would activate a kind of signal on the Presto system that would limit the number of trips that an individual would be charged for, say, within a week period or within a month period?
Again, to you, Chair Vicente, clearly fare capping is an option of another fare type media. We are one of the few that offer a suite of different fare types. For example, weekly passes, monthly passes, and again, the e-purse fare payment. When you get to fare capping, it brings up other challenges that we have to go through. For example, fare capping is after so many trips, then they may become free, or there might be a reduced price on them. This becomes a more complicated approach and has to be studied. We did look at that when we implemented Presto, and we did look at that in a review about 4 or 5 years ago. There needs to be some consensus with other systems that transfer to us, but right now we are not recommending or considering that at this time unless we're directed to do so.
Okay. Can we perhaps then ask you, Alex, to look into this and report back to council on how, while we're in this COVID-19 emergency and due to delays to transit schedules, riders may be experiencing longer than normal trips. We want to ensure that if they're going from point A to point B, that they are only billed once, and fare capping, I believe, is something that other municipalities may be using at this time to ensure that they're not getting billed for additional trips that really aren't additional trips. They're just trips that are taking longer due to the increase in the schedules.
Is the direction of committee to do so, Chair, we'd be more than happy to do that. We would ask that we have some time on that because of the COVID situation, us returning to fare collection, understanding the data behind all this and the financial implications on this, because once you introduce it, there are long-term financial implications on this, and that study may take some time. So it respectfully request that there's some time given on this if this is a direction from committee to proceed with this.
Thank you, Alex. How much time do you think, is this something that can be done before our July 1st implementation of reactivation of the fares?
Not, in my view, to you, Chair, that with no level of confidence that I would have to be able to do that quick. I would believe firmly that we would need several months of data once we reenact and understand the COVID implications. We could look at interim measures, though, if trips do take longer than 2 hours because of delays in capacity, and we would know what those capacity issues are. You start injecting then higher fraud rates on the use of Presto, and there's multiple implications on the transfers between jurisdictions and how that technology handles it through Metrolinx and Presto at this time. So that would be the best outcome if we allow us several months to do that and look at that. But we could try to look at an immediate short-term measure in the event that we're delaying trips because of capacity issues. Again, typically, unless it's a transfer, that person or individual wouldn't be paying until they board with that capacity, and then it would be 2 hours from that point of time.
Okay, thank you. So I think that would be the direction, and if staff can also provide for an interim measure, which can help our transit ridership avoid being billed twice for taking a single trip that exceeds 2 hours.
If that's the direction, absolutely, Councillor.
Thank you. I have a question. So moving on, I have a question. That motion is there. So I have a question from Councillor Williams. Councillor Williams?
No, that was a question earlier after government relations.
Okay, thank you. So I can see now there's no further questions. Mr. Clerk, do we need to have a vote for this item?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. One, to receive the verbal report from the mayor, and secondly, if I'm just trying to interpret your motion, it would be that Brampton Transit staff be requested to investigate and report back on the possibility of transit fare capping due to transit trip lengths that may be impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic service impacts.
Correct. And I'll leave that deadline open, but if staff can come back to us before July 1 with any potential interim measure that they could recommend. Thank you. So seeing no further questions, I'll ask the clerk to, are there any opposed to this motion?
I'm opposed. Councillor Williams, I'm opposed.
So noted, Councillor Williams opposed. Any other opposed? We have a question from Councillor Santos.
So I appreciate the July 1st deadline, Councillor Vicente, that you put forward. But I also recognized from General Manager Milojevic that he said it might take a lot of time to bring that information forward. I just wanted to confirm with Alex that July 1st is enough time, or whenever it is that Councillor Vicente put forward as a deadline.
And through the chair, certainly if it's a verbal update that I can provide in a week or two time prior to July 2nd, I can provide an update on what we're looking at. To implement a measure that would be handled through Presto would be very complex, and how you manage that in terms of the impacts on fraud rates because of that would be very difficult. So for a full, concise solution, I would say would be very challenging, if not impossible, to do by July 2nd. If the expectation is to provide a verbal update to committee and mayor and council, then I'd be more than happy to do that prior to July 2nd.
Thank you. So I'm happy to remove the deadline if that becomes an issue. Councillor Bowman.
Thanks very much to you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering if Alex has any idea how often this is happening. Like, is this happening 500 times a day, or is this happening 10 times a week? Staff right now is very stretched due to getting back online from COVID-19. In fact, we're still only in phase 1. And I'm just wondering whether this is the best use of their time to put this report together based on the number of times this would actually occur. Thank you.
And if I may, through the chair, and thank you, Councillor Bowman, for recognizing that we do have challenges, and I'm not going to try to not highlight that enough, but we have capacity challenges. Our community is opening up. Our ridership has increased tremendously. We are leaving several people behind as a result of our capacity challenges because of the physical distancing. Some of the challenges within our community for a 2-hour trip, I believe, is more than ample for most, if not all, trips. There might be some exceptions, and we can try to gather that data. I think if I'm not, and I don't want to be putting words in Councillor Vicente's discussions, but clearly the challenge is if you're going within jurisdiction. So as you know, the whole 905 have agreed to a transfer policy through Presto that we've all agreed to. So if you board a bus in Brampton, you have a 2-hour limit that's put on your Presto, you can transfer into Mississauga, you can transfer into Oakville, Burlington, and continue your trip to where you want to go. Agreement was to expire in 2 hours. So if you don't get to your destination, you'd have to pay another fare within that jurisdiction. Typically, it's a couple of dollars, or your alternative is to take GO Transit on longer trips like that. So clearly, within our community alone, I believe 2 hours is a very reasonable trip, even with capacity issues. But we can look at gathering some data to identify how often this is happening and potentially recommend some interim solutions, whether they be manual in process until post-COVID, or look at some more longer-term solution through Presto that would identify the financial implications on that different fare structure. And we'd have to bring that back with a report for decision-making.
Thank you. Councillor Bowman, do you have any other questions?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Medeiros.
Thank you, Councillor Vicente. I do, you know, and I understand that you have to, what staff's response in terms of collecting data and verifying and looking at the capacity of our staff. But at the same time, I do believe if there's an issue that's been identified, and I thank you, Councillor Vicente, for bringing this forward, you know, I think we do need remedies sooner than later, especially when we're looking at what could be the impact on many of these, and a lot of these folks who are on transit are most vulnerable. So I'm not sure, you know, there's one aspect is the research. I think the other aspect, certainly from my perspective, I think from staff, is speaking to this one individual and trying to understand if there's other individuals in this situation, and try to put some form of remedy in the meantime before you look at this in a more long-term, meaningful, because if this is happening, this must be something consistent. And, you know, consulting with Councillor Vicente on this. And in terms of priorities, I would say that this would be a priority if capacity of staffing is an issue. We have task forces, we have many things that are sort of entering into activities that is not on a daily basis. So I think from a staffing perspective, in terms of reorganizing staff, shouldn't be an issue. So I don't know, it's this big cumbersome exercise. I appreciate that you want to do a more fulsome review, but I also appreciate if there's one individual, or chances are there's several individuals who are facing this. And I think that this is something that should be fairly quick to address in the meantime and provide some remedy.
Thank you, Councillor Medeiros. As I mentioned before, I'm happy to give for no deadline on this. And as Alex Milojevic pointed out, that there may be interim measures that transit staff can provide.
And if I may, Chair.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and certainly through the Chair, Councillor Medeiros, absolutely, we don't shy away from anything we can do for our customers. And I don't want the capacity to be mistaken with staff capacity versus the capacity on our system to be carrying the people that we're carrying. And I believe that was the focus in terms of what I was trying to communicate, was the ability of carrying the passengers that we have with the 1/3 capacity. And definitely we'll be looking into this and reporting back.
Great. Thank you.
Mayor Brown, do you have any question? Okay, seeing none. The motion as seen on the screen. Any opposed?
Yes, I'm opposed.
Councillor Willens is opposed.
Councillor Bowman, no.
Councillor Bowman is opposed. Anyone else? So that carries. And we also have a motion from Councillor Williams to receive this update from Mayor Patrick Brown. Any opposed? That also carries. Thank you. Now move on to delegations. Our next item is item 7.1, a delegation from Tony Romanelli, the president of Robert Corridor, the general manager of RCC Media, regarding revenue generating bridge messaging opportunities for the city of Brampton. Welcome, Tony and Robert.
Thank you very much. Sound check. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of council and city staff. My name is Robert Corridor, representing RCC Media, along with company president Tony Romanelli, here to discuss a revenue generating and city messaging digital program that is sure to benefit the city of Brampton. We are delighted to be discussing our CN Rail Bridge Overpass messaging program once again to City Council. In our last council resolution of 2017, our existing static bridge messaging partnership program was extended by an additional 5 years, and the notion of conversion to digital formats was as well closely finalized. Next slide, please. At present, RCC Media has been working directly with economic development and communication staff teams since 2007, managing vinyl bridge messaging at both the Main Street and Queen Street overpass locations. Our existing contract in place with the City of Brampton is set to expire in 2022. The existing contract cost to the City of Brampton is $122,000 annually. RCC Media already has in place both vinyl and digital bridge messaging formats in the following cities: City of Vaughan, City of London, City of Pickering, and City of Markham, with numerous discussions ongoing with various other nationwide communities. As today's presentation and proposal relate to Region of Peel roadways, digital bridge formats are already permitted and in place in the City of Mississauga as of early 2019. Next slide, please. RCC Media is recommending a two-phase approach to our proposal. Phase 1, 6 months required for completion upon City Council approval. Essentially, we would fabricate and install digital and static messaging formats at 7 CN Rail overpass locations located within the City of Brampton, location list as per our presentation deck. The existing 2 downtown overpass locations to remain vinyl executions as per the existing contract, scheduled conversion for phase 2 deployment. RCC Media proposes to revenue share with the City of Brampton at a rate of $15,000 per screen annually. A total of 14 screens would provide an annual revenue share potential of $210,000 to the City of Brampton. RCC Media is also proposing to discontinue the fees associated with our existing contract in place for vinyl placements at Queen and Main Street downtown locations, a value and savings to the city of $122,000. The two combined would provide up to $320,000 benefit to the City of Brampton annually. City of Brampton to receive all vinyl portions of the bridge overpass for corporate branding. If you could see Appendix A of our presentation deck. And the downtown locations of Main Street and Queen Street overpasses would remain vinyl as per the existing contract, messaging refreshed 2 times per year, all at no cost to the city. And City of Brampton would receive unlimited override on all digital screens within the market for emergency alerts. Phase 2. Upon City of Brampton Council finalization of overall plans and strategies for the downtown core, RCC Media will convert the existing Main Street and Queen Street vinyl formats to digital static combinations. The City of Brampton is to receive 30 seconds per minute for each of the 4 downtown digital screen locations for city messaging initiatives. If you could reference Appendix B for samples of different city messages care of the City of Vaughan. Vinyl portions of the digital bridges would be used by the City of Brampton for corporate branding. All of this at no additional cost to the city. Next slide, please. Benefits. We feel there are numerous benefits as laid out in our presentation that you can see for yourself. The ability to generate revenues and message to city residents remains paramount in building any city. I would like to share a present-day case study as it relates to today's COVID-19 pandemic world. The City of Vaughan have been placing COVID-19 updates and city initiative messaging at all 13 digital screens located within the city, all managed directly by us here at RCC Media. City staff in Vaughan have continuously let us know that residents share great contentment for these updates and that the program is a great success, all at no cost to the City of Vaughan. Next slide, please. We are happy to address any question you may have. We have highlighted a few common questions in our presentation that have been reviewed at many City Council meetings. As these digital messaging technologies are not new and are widely permitted in many cities, numerous driver distraction studies have been conducted that we have shared with city staff. We are happy to continue reviewing the same with Brampton staff. There is no evidence that digital signage contributes to increased driver distraction. Next slide, please. So essentially, we provided a mock-up reference where the digital screen, this is the Main Street location, digital screen would be placed over roadway oncoming traffic, and the remaining of the location would be in a vinyl execution that would be used for the City of Brampton for corporate branding. Obviously, we would be working in conjunctions with the communications group to get a design approved by the city. Next slide, please. Here is just a sample of the many digital slides that are created that we post either daily, weekly, or monthly. There is a communications schedule that is published monthly with instructions sent to us with creative for deployment. In conclusion, on behalf of RCC Media, I'd like to thank you for your time and wish you and your families health and happiness. Myself and Tony are available to answer any questions you may have. RCC Media is very proud of its long-standing working relationship with the City of Brampton, and we are delighted to continue working with city staff to allow for messaging and revenue sharing opportunities.
Thank you very much, Robert. Have questions from members of council. Councillor Paleshi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm trying to think of some questions. I really wanted to provide a comment. I was down in Mississauga just the other day, and I saw this type of billboard and started thinking right away, why don't we have this in the city? And then all of a sudden, this is on the agenda. So I was like, oh, okay, so somebody's reading my mind, I guess. But I guess so there's ultimately no cost to the City of Brampton to have these displayed on all of the overhead bridges?
Through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely no additional cost to the city. And with in our proposal, there's the opportunity to share revenues per screen annually, and as well with the elimination of the fees that the City of Brampton presently pays for our vinyl executions, it's only more money that the City of Brampton would be saving.
Okay, and then you're offering up 30 seconds for, was it every minute?
Each minute for the two downtown locations of Queen Street and Main Street, we would provide you with 30 seconds per minute. Industry standards for display ads on these digital screens is either 6 seconds or 10 seconds. Something that we would discuss with city staff on what would suit you best.
Sure.
So essentially that would provide you 5 or 3 messages every minute on all 4 screens.
Right. And then who is providing the content, or who is accepting what the additional 30 seconds per minute is? Is it yourselves, RCC Media?
Yeah, the additional 30 seconds per minute would be sold for third-party advertising purposes to finance the whole program.
Okay, and then in the City of Brampton, we currently have advertisers on many parts of the city, and we're actually going through looking at more advertising opportunities within the City of Brampton. But we also have some policies around, who can promote their type of business. We don't want certain types of or political ads or anything like that. Would you work with the City of Brampton to ensure that you are abiding by our policy?
Absolutely. At present, we're bound by the Canadian advertising standards and as well by the standards put in place by CN Rail which include political messaging and all the things that we would probably assume. And we would work with city staff.
Yeah, like I wouldn't want, as much as, you know, I like, you know, Frank Scarpetti, I don't want a thing of Markham on in the downtown on our, if you know, him advertising in our downtown, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd like to also share this with council that in all the other municipalities in which these formats already exist, the local community, the small business, medium business community, we provide a lot of ample opportunities for them to get on those screens and with great success.
So I think this is fantastic. I think this is moving us in a really positive and good direction. And I'm happy to refer this back to staff for a report to come back to a future council meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pleshy. I do have a motion here. I see no further questions. I do have a motion here by Councillor Dillon to receive the delegation. Councillor Dillon, do you also want to refer this to staff?
So maybe I can just add, I can move the referral to staff. The receipt of the delegation is Councillor Dillon, and I'm happy to refer the matter to staff for a report to come back in the future.
Thank you. So members of the committee, we have a motion from Councillor Dillon to move for receipts, and a motion from Councillor Pleshy to refer this to staff for a report back. Are there any opposed? Seeing none, those carry. Thank you. So now we're moving on to section 8, economic development and culture section. Our next item is item 8.2.1, a staff report regarding temporary extension of outdoor patios for all wards. Do any members have any questions or comments regarding the staff report? Seeing none, I have a motion moved by Councillor Pleshy to approve the report recommendations. Any opposed? That carries. We have no new business. So now we move, there's no updates on post-secondary matters and no correspondence. So next we have item 8.5, Councillor question period for this section of the agenda. Does any member of committee have a question with regards to any part of this section of today's agenda? No? So we'll move on to public question period. Mr. Clerk, have we received any correspondence with a question from members of the public with regards to any part of today's meeting so far?
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So I'll now move the chair over to Councillor Singh to chair the corporate services section of the committee agenda. Councillor Singh. Councillor Singh? Mr. Clerk, is Councillor Singh on?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Councillor Singh is in the WebEx session. He may have, he is present virtually. Perhaps.
Mr. Chair, who's the Vice Chair of Corporate Services?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The Vice Chair for Corporate Services is Councillor Santos.
I believe that, sorry, through you, Mr. Clerk, I believe that Councillor Singh had said that his mic was not working earlier. And I'm happy to chair this section if Councillor Singh is not available at the moment.
Sorry, it wasn't working. I just got it working. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I'm having some challenges on my computer, but we're okay. Okay, moving on to the corporate services section. 9.2.1 is a report on investments for the year ended December 31st, 2019. Do any members of council have any questions? Councillor Pleshy, was that from the previous? Just confirming.
Yeah, it was previous. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Okay, no problem. And I actually have a question, a brief question on this to the treasurer. Are we? I saw we do invest a little bit in equities, and for last year's investments, we had a return of 2.5%. Are we looking at equities, adding to our equity portfolio this year as well?
To the chair, yes, we have been adding to our equities this year.
Okay.
So continue on with that. But we are still under, we're about 1.5% of the total portfolio at this point. So it's still a fairly small amount.
Okay, yeah, so I guess the risk is okay, because I'm just worried about, as you know, the current market is very volatile. So, but since it's such a small percentage, I guess our exposure to risk is quite low, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, all right, thank you. We're gonna approve the recommendations. Are any members opposed? Hearing none, the recommendations are approved. Moving on to 9.2.2 is a report on the bylaw to establish bank signing and investment management authority and to repeal bylaw 37-2018. Do any members have any questions? Seeing none, there are three recommendations. I have a motion from Council Santos to approve those three recommendations. Are any members opposed? Hearing none, the recommendations are approved. Moving on to 9.2.3, a report on 2019 year-end operating budget and reserve report. Do any members have any questions on this report? Seeing none, I have a motion from Councillor Bowman to approve the three recommendations. Are any members opposed? Hearing none, these recommendations are approved. Moving on to 9.2.4, a report corporate forecasting review 2020. Do any members have any questions?
Mr. Chair, that item was approved on consent.
Yep, apologies. Moving on to 9.2.5, a request to begin procurement payment process products and services for a 2-year period. Do any members have any questions? Seeing none, there are two recommendations and I have a motion from Councillor Bessent to approve those recommendations. Are any members opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Moving on to 9.2.6, a report on arts, culture, and tourism programs and initiatives to support sector recovery. There's also one recommendation, and I see Councillor Santos has a question.
My apologies, it's for the next one.
Okay, no problem. So seeing that there are no other questions, I have a motion from Councillor Medeiros to approve the recommendation. Are any members opposed? Hearing none, the motion is carried. Moving on to 9.2.7. It's a report on relief fund for artists and nonprofit art organizations. And I believe Councillor Santos would like to speak to this.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you also to all staff and all the various organizations who provided some input in the results and the survey results in terms of this relief fund. Just a couple of questions for the team. The $260,000 that's coming out of the Arts Culture Development Agency Fund, where from that budget is that coming out of? Is that kind of the surplus budget that would have otherwise been spent this year, or are we taking away from the development agency to compensate for this relief fund?
Thanks, Councillor. It's Jason, and I'll ask Kelly to Manager of Culture to speak to that.
Good afternoon, Councillor Santos. Through the chair, thank you for the question. The portion of the fund for this organization is $260 from the development agency budget, and that is a portion of unspent dollars up to this point in the year. As you know, we're currently recruiting the chair for the development agency, and so we've split the operating budget into the 4 quarters of the year and estimate that this is the available funds that will be unused for 2020, as well as unused funds from the Festivals and Specials Events Office.
Okay, great. So it's just the unused funds at the moment. And are we sacrificing any budget from the development agency up until this point in order to compensate the relief fund, or are we still on track and on budget for the development agency specifically?
Thank you. Through the chair, we estimate that when the program lead is recruited and operational, that they will have the appropriate funds for the operations and programs for the duration of part of Q3 and the remainder of Q4 this year.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kelly, for clarifying that. And then my other, my final question is just about the application process. So this is a relief fund where artists and artistic organizations are looking for support right away. And I know that in the recommendations, the director is going to be given delegated authority to approve the funding. I just want to make sure that the application process itself is not tedious and doesn't require a lot of paperwork, and is somewhat easy and simple for folks to apply to so that they can access that relief funding as soon as possible.
Thank you. Through the chair, we couldn't agree more. We know that this needs to be a process by which the artists and arts organizations can submit their losses as a result of COVID-19, that it can be evaluated quickly, and that the director has the authority to enter into the agreement to disperse the funds. So we agree, and we'll be sure to report back to council on the results of the program and the organizations that are the recipients of the funding.
Fantastic. And it obviously, like, things still have to meet the smell test, obviously, but I think this relief fund is great, and thank you very much to the team for putting this together quite quickly, especially after those phone calls and feedback we got from the artists. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Medeiros.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Sang. I no need, because Councillor Santos asked the questions, it was more around the application process not being cumbersome, and exactly what Councillor Santos said in terms of passing the smell test. So it's trying to find that understanding that we can't have this prolonged, but at the same time, we want to make sure there's checks and balances. That's it. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you. Seeing no other questions, I have a motion from Councillor Dillon to approve the 4 recommendations. Are any members of council opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Moving on to 9.2.8, which is a tourism festival and event recovery report. Do any members have any questions? Is that Councillor Santos? Is that you again with the question?
It is.
Okay, go ahead. Just confirming.
Thank you for confirming. So in terms of Appendix A on the report, where it's listed the marquee festivals and events, funding details and current status, it looks like, and I did read the report in terms of the 10-day deadline that we're giving various festivals and events to decide what they want to do. And I am noticing here that the majority of them have made decisions whether to cancel or to modify, but there is one to be determined. And if I just want to make sure, because the World Jazz Festival, the mayor, myself, and other councillors have been in touch and speaking to Carmen specifically about what a modified World Jazz Festival could look like in Brampton. And I just want to make sure that we're doing whatever it is that we can to still make that a success, and based on whatever options they're bringing forward. So do you guys have any updates on what that modified festival may look like? Because it's the only one that says to be determined.
Thanks, Councillor. It's Jason, and I would just say that we're in discussions with the organization with respect to details and are reviewing them, and just looking to finalize what cost and expenses that can be part of the funding and which can't, and as outlined by a few councillors previously, that obviously needs to pass some due diligence. So we're just completing that right now.
Okay, sounds good. So, because from today forward, does that mean that they only have 10 days? Like the organizers of the festival and the team, the staff, have 10 days to sort that out?
I think we're in the middle of looking at it. So yes, it's 10 days, but we're in dialogue with them right now. So I would say that from ratification today, it would be it's a 20-day period.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have 4 recommendations on 9.2.8 and a motion by Councillor Medeiros to approve the recommendation.
Chair Singh, it's Peter.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
Mayor
I see
Brown
that.
would like
Sorry,
to speak.
apologize. Mayor Brown, you're next.
Just briefly wanted to echo that I love the plans I've seen for the World Jazz Festival and how creative they've been to be able to make something that is consistent with physical distancing. And so I'm glad that we're hearing from Jason that this is going to be accommodated. And frankly, this may be an example for how other groups can be creative to still celebrate the incredible artistic and musical talent we have in the city. So where there's a will, there's a way, and I'm glad that that's being recognized.
Wonderful. Okay, so there are 4 recommendations to be approved, moved by Councillor Medeiros. Anybody opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Moving on to 9.2.9 is the Advanced Brampton Fund 2020-2021. There are 6 recommendations here. Do any members have any questions? Seeing none. I have a motion from Councillor Pleshy to approve the 6 recommendations. Is anybody opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Moving on to 9.2.10, annual reporting incidents of hate-motivated vandalism on city property. Do any members have any questions? Councillor Williams.
Hi there. Thank you so much for the report. Through the chair, just a question on page 4 with the chart, and there's a sentence that says 34. It makes reference to 34 incidences, but the chart says 39. So I just think it might need to be corrected. There's 2 areas where the report says makes reference to 34 cases, but with it being 39, that does add up to the 118 cases. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess, Commissioner Partari, do you have I guess you'll make those changes or look into that?
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Through the chair, we can easily have that updated. We have some additional new numbers from this year, and we will update that.
Okay. Thank you. I have a motion from Councillor Williams to approve the report. Are any members opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries, and that brings us to the end. And I will pass it on to Councillor Vicente to complete the next section.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. We still have councillor question period.
Oh, sorry.
9.5 and public question period. There are no questions, just to advise.
Okay, so we have no public questions. Do any members of council have any questions? Hearing none. Councillor Vicente, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Singh. We're now going to go on to Public Works and Engineering section. Our next item is 10.2.1, a staff report regarding the development charge funded environmental assessment study for intersection improvements at Heart Lake Road and Countryside Drive in Ward 2. Do any members have any questions or comments regarding the staff report? Councillor Paleshi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and happy to see this. I think we got, Councillor Willens moving the report. Happy to support this. Just want to encourage that the conversation with Toronto Region Conservation Authority is happening with respect to anything that else that can be done to try and ensure the safety of the animals that cross the road north and south of this intersection, the safety of the residents using this stretch of property that has seen an increase in speed from vehicles trying to get around the 410, although as of lately I think most people have been just using the 410. But I'd also just want to ensure that Toronto Region Conservation Authority and we're also having those conversations with respect to what else can be done at Heart Lake Conservation Area to ensure the safety of the commuter traffic and the people that are using the conservation area during their times that they have those events that are happening there. So happy to support and see that Councillor Willens is moving this report. Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you. I have a question from Councillor Willens.
Yes, I guess it's for staff, just quickly. Does this funding or the money, is it being used also just for that intersection at Heart Lake and Countryside, I believe, but is there going to be money put aside to talk about a roundabout at the entrance at Heart Lake Conservation? As Councillor Paleshi said, that becomes quite a dangerous entranceway with this event going on. So I'm just hoping that there's conversations still going on the roundabout at the entranceway as well. So maybe staff can just quickly answer. I don't need a long report. Thanks.
Through you, Chair, this is Jasbir. Yes, Councillor, those discussions are going on.
Perfect. Great. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Willens. I have a motion moved by you, Councillor Willens, to approve the report recommendations. Any opposed? Seeing none, that carries. Next, we have item 10.2.2, a staff report regarding the request to begin procurement for the supply and delivery of OEM parts and service for various City of Brampton vehicles for a 3-year period. Do any members have questions or comments regarding this report and the contained recommendations? Seeing none, I have a motion moved by Councillor Bowman to approve the report recommendations. Any opposed? That carries. We have no correspondence. Do any members of committee have any questions with regards to any part of this, any item in this part of the agenda? Seeing none, for public question period, Mr. Clerk, do we have any questions from members of the public with regards to any item of this part?
No questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'll now pass the chair over to Councillor Santos, the chair of the Corporate Services section of the committee agenda.
Thank you. The next item of the agenda is the Community Services section. And I believe there is only one item which was added, item number 10. So item number 10.2.1 was put into consent, I believe. Oh no, sorry. Sorry guys, I'm trying to find my space. 10.2.1 was put into consent, and then 11.2.1 was put into consent, and now we're on to 11.3, an item that was added on the request of Councillor Dillon regarding cottonwood trees. So Councillor Dillon, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Santos. Just confirming if my mic is working. I was having some problems earlier.
It is working. Thank you, Councillor.
Thanks. So I've added this discussion item because there's a number of residents on Linstock Drive, which is in the Countryside and airport area. And for a number of years, they've been complaining about the cottonwood trees that are in the ravine in the back. And I've sent some pictures and some videos to our council members. I've also sent it to the clerk. They have a petition as well
that they have signed from a number of residents. And essentially, the cottonwood tree has become a nuisance for the area. And so there's an excessive amount of pollen that, especially on windy days, it gets into their ducts, it gets into their air conditioning units. And essentially, it's like snowing in June and July. And so we've had staff come, Ed Fagan had come down, met with the residents, and there was I thought a solution which I thought that we had come to, but I think what Rob Gaspard said is that we probably should have this discussion in council or committee rather. And so essentially what the request today is that I'm asking staff to report back on solutions, to come up with solutions, working with the local residents, and if there's any agencies that are involved, for example, TRCA, or if we have to work with our forestry staff as well, that we can come together to find a solution for these residents. So it gets to the point where they can't even enjoy their backyard anymore. They don't bring out their patio furniture. They don't go out to their backyard anymore. There's been a number of respiratory problems that have been increased because of the pollen. And so it's not just Linstock, it's extending on the other side of the creek to Maldives Ave as well. And so that's the request. I think you can take a look at some of those pictures. I'm not sure if we can get them on the screen here, but I did email them earlier.
Through you, Madam Chair, we're trying to pull them up on the screen right now.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon. And I did see one or two photos that were shared on the screen. Oh, there they are. There's a photo of the, it does look like snow. Oh, who's that?
The wrong guy, yeah. So we were there just while we're looking through these videos. We were there last week, and it's a windy day, and it looked like it was some flurries. And so, some of these pictures don't really tell the whole truth of cute dog there. They don't tell the whole story of the issues that they're having. And so, that's why we're requesting staff to work with the residents to try to find out what we can do.
Thank you, Councillor. So is there a direction for staff in the form of a motion that you're bringing forward, or will staff just take that as direction?
I think I had a conversation with staff. I think Derek's here as well. I think Rob is here. And so from what I took from it, that was direction from committee to staff.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm trying to look at the speakers list. I think we do have one. I have possibly Councillor Paleshi and Willens.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Councillor Dillon, for sending the email and the pictures to members of council. I had a chance to go through them really quickly, and I just wanted to confirm with staff, and I can confirm this with TRCA as well, that this tree is actually an invasive species.
Through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Paleshi. So we can confirm that with our staff. I do not believe that this tree is an invasive species. I do understand that the products, from the cottonwood is a nuisance, but I don't think it's classified as an invasive species, but we will confirm that in our follow-up report.
Okay, great. Then I look forward to seeing that report. And if I know that TRCA and with CBC and Councillor Santos would know this, that we have an invasive species a program that we get volunteers to go out in the community and try and get rid of, and it's more around the mustard stuff or whatever else that's out there that we really don't like, or that buckthorn is terrible in the area that Councillor Willens and I represent. So happy to be a part of those discussions with TRCA, as I'm sure Councillor Santos would be too, to ensure that this gets resolved. look forward to the report coming back. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And Councillor Williams, you are next.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, I can confirm that the cottonwood tree is not an invasive species, as I do have a horticulture degree. Secondly, they're one of the oldest trees on the planet, actually known to man. So cutting down these trees should not be an option in that report. But there is a product called ethrol. That's the trade name for it. It's a growth regulator, and what it does, it stops the trees from flowering. So maybe if staff can include that in the report, that might be a solution for the residents. And this is only a certain time of the year. They usually generally stop blooming around this time. So I'm sure the issues are very short-lived. But anyway, maybe you can look at the growth regulator. But cutting down those trees is definitely not an option. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I have Councillor Dillon, followed by Councillor Paleshi. Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Chair. And I think some of the options given by Councillor Williams are certainly welcome. I'm no expert on the trees. We just, relaying the message from the residents, and obviously, as many trees as we can save, we want to do that. In no way was a request today to cut the tree down from myself, but the residents, and I understand, the tree's been there for a long time, but the residents have also mentioned that they're willing to assist if, whether it's relocation, which I probably assume is not possible. They had mentioned, they'd like it cut down, that they could, plant the double of number of trees. But obviously we want to look at and do our best to make sure that we save them. But definitely whatever options we can come up with, the residents would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Paleshi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I knew when I asked the question, I should have been asking Councillor Williams, because I did know that he had the degree. So my question now would go back to staff to have a look at. We have a few trees on. I don't know if they're considered endangered or not. Councillor Williams would be able to speak to that again. But I think there is a historical tree preservation act or law that's also has something to do with what we're now going to be discussing. So just ask staff to check in on that as well with the report coming back. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, that brings us now to item 11.5, Councillor's question.
I have one more question.
I apologize, Councillor Williams, go ahead.
It's okay. Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. And maybe in the report as well, staff, can you put it, I guess I'm assuming it will be in the report anyway, but I believe those trees, that stand of trees, was there originally before the subdivision was built, and leaving a certain number of trees was part of the subdivision agreement with the developer. So can you dig that up and include that in the report? Because I know a lot of people pay a premium to have those type of backdrop in their backyard. So thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Derek.
Oh, sorry, Madam Chair. Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, Councillor Williams, we'll include a full history of the subdivision as well in the trees in our report. Thank you.
Okay, great. So now our next item is 11.5, Councillor question period. Do any members of council have any questions regarding this section? Community services, seeing none, moving on. 11.6, public question period. Mr. Clerk, do we have any questions from the public that have been submitted through email?
Madam Chair, there are no questions.
Thank you very much. Moving on. 12.1, referred matters list, which is published quarterly on a meeting agenda, and the link is copied to each agenda to include a list of referred matters. Do any members of council have any questions regarding the referred matters list? Seeing none. Our next item is 13, public question period. Mr. Clerk, do we have any questions from the public that have been submitted through email?
We do not, but Madam Chair, I wonder if the 12.1, the referred matters list, this is the quarterly period where the actual referred matters list is published with the agenda. So if there are no questions, there'd just be a motion from the committee to receive the referred matters list, please.
Okay, I see no questions regarding the referred matters list. Is there a motion from a counselor? I have a motion from Councillor Vicente to receive the referred matters list. Anyone opposed? Otherwise, your vote will count in the affirmative. I see no opposition. That is carried. Next item then is public question period. Mr. Clerk, we do not have any questions as confirmed by you just before this. Final section, not final section. Next section is closed session. And I believe all of the items, I reviewed them, will probably want to be discussed in closed. Item 14.1, 14.2, 14.3, and also the added item 14.4 by Councillor Williams. I apologize. I have a motion moved by Councillor Vicente to move into closed session to deal with the following items. Personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. 14.2, a position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on or by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. 14.3, a position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. And the final item, 14.4, which is regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. Motion from Councillor Vicente. If there are any opposed, if not, your vote will count in the affirmative. I see no opposition. Mr. Clerk, how much time would you need before we go on to that conference call?
Madam Chair, 10 minutes, please.
Okay, so 10 minutes. So at 2:49, please make sure you are on the phone with the phone number and conference call details that the clerk has provided. And please make sure that you leave this particular WebEx meeting in the meantime. Thank you. See you in 10 minutes. We're just going to get going because there isn't that much to report back. In the continuing interest of transparency and open government, I will report in public session any outcomes from today's closed session business. As a result of our closed session, I wish to report the following. 14.1, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. This item was considered in closed session and direction was given to staff. Item 14.2, a position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. This item was considered in closed session and direction was given to staff. 14.3, a position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. This item was considered in closed session and direction was given to staff. And 14.4, regarding an identifiable individual, that discussion happened and no direction was given to staff. The final item is item 15, adjournment. Committee is scheduled to meet next on Wednesday, September 9th, 2020 at 9:30 a.m. I have a motion from Councillor Willens to adjourn today's meeting. That committee do now adjourn to meet again for a regular meeting of committee on Wednesday, September 9th, 2020, 9:30 a.m. or at the call of the chair. Is there anyone opposed to this motion? Otherwise, your vote will count in the affirmative. I see or hear no oppositions. Thank you. That motion is carried. This motion is adjourned. Please be safe, stay healthy, and practice physical distancing. All the best, everyone.